Hey everybody, and welcome to the Rabbit Trail Podcast. This is episode number 148.
148.
And
without the and.
So anyway, we're glad that you're joining with us. If you are new to this podcast, this is the podcast we want to chase the truth wherever it runs. And that's a conversation, kind of freewheeling and kind of multi-directional, and a conversation about things that were brought up during the sermon, maybe some things that I dropped during the sermon, or ideas that we had as we were talking about these various things. And so we're just glad you're joining us. If you enjoy this podcast, be sure to let other people know about it. We would love to continue to answer your questions and things like that. But before we go further, I would love to introduce myself. My name is Greg Harris. I'm the senior pastor here at Olive Branch, and my friends, my fellow rabbit chasers, are...
Hello, my name is Stephen Oldham. I'm the local outreach pastor here at Olive Branch, and I just want to say thank you for watching. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe, and let your friends know, and share the podcast out. That's the best way to get this out. But if you're if you're listening to us on your walk or on your way home, we thank you as well. Make sure you subscribe and share that audio podcast with others. But if you have questions, we'd like to hear from you. So how would we get questions to us?
Well, I mean, obviously, we are saving the best for last. I am Brent Branchot. I'm the Connections pastor at Olive Branch Church.
He is the favorite.
Yeah. And I just want to say, we want to hear your questions. We want to hear your comments, or at least read them. So you can send them to or email them to rabbittrail@obcc.church. rabbittrail@obcc.church. We would love to do that. And we've got a slew of questions from Debbie that we will get to over the next few weeks.
Dumped the truck.
You know what? And right now they're like all in Genesis and Exodus. So I do feel like she's probably beginning in Genesis at the beginning of the year and just writing down every question that comes to her mind. Great job, Debbie.
Let's go.
So we will be addressing those later in the show and in the next coming weeks. But I just wanted to tell you guys some weird story. But the other day, I saw his nose hair, and I thought to myself, I wonder how bad it hurts to pull out a nose hair. So I pulled it out, and by the reaction of the guy asleep next to me on the bus, it hurts.
Oh.
Boom, chakalaka.
Oh gosh. Brenton's terrible jokes. Ding. All right. So thank you, Brent. We really appreciate the humor.
Yeah.
And don't sleep near Brent.
And being really nosy about other people's nose hairs.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Well, anyway, just the next segment to get as fast away from that as possible. Stephen, you've been checking out our kind of web traffic. What's going on out there?
Picked up quite a bit. That's nice.
Dark side, light side, upside, downside. What's going on?
The deep, dark sides of the interwebs. We're going onto YouTube, and onto YouTube we are looking at some of the responses. One of the responses is to igniting our devotion. What your next after Pentecost? It's a short from the sermon. And so let's go ahead and read. This person's name is G27 Pat. The ruling class has corrupted the Protestant church completely to serve mammon instead of God and our fellow man. Prosperity gospels, mega churches, and ones where the focus is in subjugating others, not taking care of needy, all rejecting Christ, and people are leaving because their words and actions differ. Which is odd connection to that particular one, because I thought it was just an inspirational, like, hey, look at what the Pentecost church did, and we should do the same thing. And this was a response. Man, I'm just like, I don't know who hurt you, Pat, but I think it's odd that has happened. That I'm not saying it doesn't happen, just to steel man your argument. I'm sure there are churches that are subjugated, mega churches that have done bad things. I don't think being a mega church by itself is a bad thing. There's a lot of wonderful things that have happened out of mega churches, especially in regards to the gospel. Prosperity gospel is a problem. So I agree with many of these problems. I just don't think that when there's so many denominations of Protestantism that are unconnected to each other and are unconnected even in their own denominations, that we are that organized to have a ruling class. So I guess, and to have it corrupt. Now, you might say there's a wave of something that's negative, but I think that if that's really what you think, I would encourage you to keep looking, because I imagine there is a group of people that's not occurring with. So the blanket statement is what I worry about.
Yeah, it's a bit of a hasty generalization.
It's a big one. How many different Protestant denominations are there? and
thousands.
And so I would just say, I imagine someone is doing something good somewhere in the Protestant church.
But I would assume, like, it's kind of interesting because I would assume that the ruling class in the argument is the pastors or maybe the denomination, like you mentioned. Like, I mean, I'll just speaking for us, the denomination we are with is called the Southern Baptists, and they actually don't control their denomination. It's a self-affiliation.
Some would say that was the problem.
Yeah, churches actually individually affiliate and don't actually have a ruling power over them. In fact, in our church, I'm the senior pastor, and I have an elder team that's above me, and their job is to ensure that I'm not the ruler, right? And they are not staff members. They're actually volunteers that are part of our church that have shown character and investment in the church. So I'm not sure what a ruling class would look like in our kind of setting or situation. We do have staff, but again, that staff is willing to submit ourselves all the way up to our elder team, and they have the right to boot me out, to disagree with me, tell me what to do, tell us what to do. And at the same time, they'll take feedback from our congregation, and we listen to our congregation. And so I'm not sure how a ruling class would associate with our church.
Yeah, like I said, the only way I could say that is if this a common experience that you've had from different churches. But again, that sounds like a problem of just your own experience as opposed to other people's don't experience that. So I wouldn't say that was a common complaint that I've gotten from people who no longer go to church or don't like Protestantism.
Or, yeah, there's also a tendency, I'll be honest, I've seen bureaucracy happen in churches too, where you have a need and you have a longing to get something, and it's hard to get that need met or to meet that pastor and talk to them. And, Brent, you handle a lot of that kind of stuff. Have you found people get frustrated trying to get their needs met in church at times?
No, I mean, I think, speaking for our church, but I feel like we are a very generous church, and we genuinely want to help people. And I think, especially, people in the local community that don't even go to our church, I think they're surprised sometimes when they come to the church and we offer help. But I would say, any kind of downfall on really helping somebody when they mention they need help or something is probably just things fall through the cracks at times where, you reached out and they didn't reach back, and then it just kind of sometimes gets, but not anything intentional, So I think we are a very generous church, and I think most of the people that attend here understand that.
And another thing that's interesting is these says we're out for mammon. And
yeah, that would be my question here.
The difficulty for me is that we can't make money. As a church, we're beholden to all the laws to pay people the same that everybody else pays. If there's a minimum wage hike, we have to raise it. Now we'd love to pay above that, but we don't get to raise prices. Legitimately, the reason churches talk about money is you have to remind them that we're not a capitalistic system, meaning we don't produce goods and services that we get paid for. We actually work completely off the donations of the people that go to the church. And that is something I don't think a lot of people outside the church reckon with very well, because they think somehow that they see the buildings and they see the stuff, and it's that's given because not earned. That's not somebody sat around, we made these profits out of this stuff, we're making people pay to come in the door. No, people give because they want to give and they believe in that vision. It is a very, very unique kind of setup. And
I would say, look at the original passage that the video came from, and you go back to Acts chapter 2, you have to explain then, how do we do church then? Because it's easy to kind of criticize what churches are doing, but then how would you do it? And then once you get involved, you realize it's not as easy as people think. Most churches aren't making tons of money. I wouldn't say there aren't people out there doing, bad things in the large masses, but that typically requires something outside of church. You're having people come in, send you something for an object, like special beads or these holy objects, and people making money off of the kind of, that secondary market of the church. But most churches aren't doing something like that. Very seldom they might put a booklet together, but most of the times they're giving it away for free. So I just don't find that to be
Or
the
covering
case.
the printing
Or
costs.
covering the, or just, or someone else might be coming through and giving a book, but it's because the church feels it has value and it's open as to why we value the book. And someone else, but that's a secondary market to just an actual church is running. I'd say if you get involved in a church and you see how little the money is and how hard it is to operate in a 501(c)(3) as a Christian, and then just how the state has really made it difficult, I think you might have a more sympathetic belief in what people are trying to do.
But I think also it's better to go find your local church and go examine that than to watch the TBN church.
Oh, well, yeah, then you have the impression that you
kind of stuff, because I think that would fit a TBN kind of model pretty easily in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, if your only source of what churches are doing is like TikTok, YouTube, the local news, then yeah, you're going to hit all the hit pieces where this stuff is happening, scandals and things, and usually it's pretty obvious as to why that's going on, except to the people who believe in that. So, and then I don't necessarily want to live in a world where people aren't allowed to choose what they want to give to and believe in. Because if that were the case, you'd shut down certain companies just because we don't like the product that they're selling or what they're doing. So I don't know. I think people are much more willing to give to a product that has a flawed moral compass than they would a church. I don't know why. Maybe it's the hypocrisy of the idea that somehow the church is supposed to live up to X examples, but a lot of these companies put out ethics. They say, hey, we're here for your family. We're making materials.
We're anti-slavery.
Yeah, or we're making materials that are pro-family or pro-children. And I was like, well, I don't know if that's actually true in the way you treat families and children. So I don't know. I think sometimes we hold churches to a different standard, but maybe that's for good reason.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would just say, I mean, I don't know if that was a statement like they're withholding any sort of giving towards churches because churches only care about mammon. But I would say, churches are pretty transparent with their budgets, and so go to your church leadership and number one, see what they're spending on ministry and doing, and just be aware of what your church is doing to help others, to help those within the body, to reach those in the community as well. And if you believe those are important things, taking care of one another and caring for one another and propagating the gospel out in our communities and beyond, then by all means give and be involved and engaged in every aspect of doing those things. So.
Yeah.
It's easy to sit on the sideline and cast stones. Are you involved? Are you engaged? Do you really understand? Is this a criticism of your church, or is this just a broad brush painting of all churches? Because I will say, Stephen mentioned mega churches, but there's smaller churches that are corrupt too. So You're going to find corruption on both sides of the spectrum, and you're going to find amazing things in both sides of the spectrum.
Sin is everywhere, isn't it?
And that is everywhere. So,
all right, let's do. So this is in relation to why vibrant churches attract new believers daily. So this has out of Acts chapter 2 as well. The vibrant church ushers a bunch of non-believers into a building, and they have a concert and a self-help seminar. The Holy Spirit, when present, when edification occurs, is when church is most vibrant.
Amen.
Any thoughts?
I think that's great. I would say, when they do, programs like, hey, we're going to do a conference this week on family or parenting or, marriage or something, or maybe even, bring an artist in here to perform. And part of that is to draw people in and then allow the Holy Spirit to work through that to change lives and affect destinies. So, it's not a bad thing to do those things, but keeping the purpose and the main thing is important.
Yeah, I think you're giving it a generous read, and I appreciate that. I think I just have a lot of questions. So
yeah, it's hard you can read it either way, right? The vibrant church ushers a bunch of non-believers into a building, and they have a concert and self-help seminar. It's not a question.
That's a statement.
It's a statement, right? So is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like, because you're saying the Holy Spirit, when present, would edify. Well, I would imagine people who are Christian bringing non-believers into a room and having a Christian concert would hope the Holy Spirit would be present and edification occurs. That's the whole point of them trying to do it. And but if you think if you just have a concert and bring new believers into the room, the question is, did you invite the Holy Spirit? And what I mean by that is, what's the reason you're doing the thing that you're doing, and is it a part of what you're doing obvious, or are you trying to just appeal to the, I guess, the entertainment aspect of that doesn't really call anybody to make a difference or change?
And the important thing is when you're doing those events and you are inviting the Holy Spirit to be present, make sure at least a month ahead of time you mail a save the date for the Holy Spirit so he can clear his calendar.
Yeah.
I think that my thinking is just, first of all, is there's a lot of laden language in the concept, right? That what is going on is a rock concert. And I'm like, okay, I understand it could look like that. In contrast to what? Probably an Eastern Orthodox
or High Church
Reformed like
that is an
liturgy, or where you sing hymns and there's only an organ, but an organ and hymns were once a concert. They were based on bar tunes.
That's what I was going to say. They were a little more than a concert. They were bar tunes that you sang while you were drunk. And
so everybody kind of knew the tune, and they could all, which implies that they were all there. And so, but then
which implies they were familiar with the bar.
Or you end up in a situation which is like, here's the thing: in very high liturgy worlds, I find that there's a lot of non-participation. That it all happens by a priest, or it happens by some kind
singers
of
and
teacher, or the singers, and you listen and you stand up. You may say something back. You may sit down and do stuff like that. But again, the difference in what is happening in a lot of churches that have quote unquote rock concerts is that you'll look around and you'll have massive participation of people singing to God the songs. They'll be involved in that. And so that's the difference between what I think is a rock concert, where it's strictly about the band on stage but this is about the words. This is about the right emotions towards God. You can do that with a hymn. You can do that with Gregorian chant. You can do that with the same stuff like a high church liturgy. All of those things can be done as long as the people are participating. So I would say this is a cultural difference. This is a cultural respect that we're trying, and I know this youngest generation is starting to push back on that kind of feel and things, because they want some kind of old school tradition. And the danger in the old school traditions is that you end up without a bridge to those who are
yeah.
So,
like, if we kept doing this for another couple hundred years, and new things had developed, it would look like, oh my gosh, it looks kind of alien. I think people are looking at things like a Rorschach test oftentimes. It's saying more about what you're feeling than it is what the actual item has gone to. I've gone to a liturgical service, and I can see the value of how to do service that way. Even if you're going through liturgy for a year or two, those are all healthy practices. But I've also seen they can be unhealthy because people are just going through the motions, just checking off boxes, just doing the things. They're not actually invoking their heart or having experiences. The opposite could also be, or the same thing could happen in a modern church. You could be sitting in a service, going through the motions, singing the songs that you sing on the radio. It's just very common to you, and it feels unsacred. That has a lot more to do with what's going on in you. And the church is trying to serve whatever population it's trying to bring in, and how it feels it needs to do that, whether it's liturgy or not. But for you as an individual, as a Christian for a while, when you get to a certain past the age of maturity, you have to ask yourself, how am I going to keep myself healthy, regardless of what the church is trying to do? Because even liturgy can be debated, and that's what you have, different things like Greek versus Roman Catholic, and then you have people versus like different versions of Lutheranism versus, which one should we use? Which prayer hymnals should we use? What songs should we use? So all of this can be the same problem, but the reason why everybody's trying to do what they're doing is to invoke their heart to be closer to the Lord and to give back to Him in an act of worship. So I'd say you could do that with anything that you're doing. People are very creative, but I would say if you're feeling these experiences, I don't think throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think figure out ways to add these practices that you're missing from other denominations into the one that you're currently at, if God has called you there. So like for me, it's like I come to a church and maybe I like the music from the 90s, and now we're way past the 90s or whatever, and it's not my music. I could say the same thing. Well, it's not spiritual.
We're not doing Delirious.
Yeah, and so the thing is like I have to at some point go, well, what would make it spiritual for me in my own practice? What would I need to add to my life to bring that fullness that I feel like I'm missing? Do I need to worship with some people that like that music together? That's hard to do because you feel like you don't have the time or effort, but you can't ask a whole culture that's trying to reach a large group of people to change for your own personal individual experience. Sometimes you have to take some responsibility for those things.
So I think also that it's a spurious claim that the Holy Spirit needs to show up in a situation. It says that where two or more are gathered, there I am in the midst of you, right? In that sense, I know that's a discipline passage, but the Spirit of God is not unpresent in his people. So wherever we are, the Spirit of God is there and the Holy Spirit is working. It is a insult to the Holy Spirit to claim that he's not with his children in the room working through his word when his word's being presented. And then as a preacher, I think one of the things that's hard is you can couch some things as like, oh, that's a self-help sermon, right? But I would say a strictly self-help sermon says you need to help yourself.
Only you can help yourself.
And only
and
you can help yourself. And I'll be quite honest, there is not a moment in our preaching here that I would ever say that would be agreed with. But the danger is to assume then that you should just get Bible knowledge and listen to some kind of historical dialogue, and then the Spirit of God's going to tell you what to apply or whatever. I've found that actually that's far more dangerous. People misapply Scripture. They come up with concepts that are outside of the range of the text's expectations, and that, hey, you've got to check that because we can misinterpret the Spirit of God just as we can misinterpret the Scriptures. And that may sound weird, but we're bad arbiters of interpretation. We just are. And so there has to be a sense of like right application. And so if you're saying that, hey, this person's applying Scriptures or applying an insight from Scriptures to our lives, that's self-help. I would say then that's been happening since the beginning because Paul wrote a lot of self-help. But it's not self-help because you can't do it yourself. Only Jesus can do it in, through you, and for you. He empowers you to do it. And so
I think that's good. We have one. I'll just end on one positive one. It's on congrats to Mary, who just got baptized. We had a really amazing, we congratulate her.
And all the other.
And what I was going to say, we have all this
5
amazing baptisms on Sunday. And so if you missed it, I go back to the YouTube channel and watch those videos. It was pretty impactful.
In fact, one of their stories is incredible. Eddie was in a literal coma, and I would love for him to tell that story. That's a
30-day coma. Wow, yeah, they were really great.
Some of the things that Michelle, his wife, that God did for her in her prayers is just it has that, like, you don't believe in miracles? Listen to this. Like, God works miracles. So please watch those videos and give us your feedback and celebrate with those people. It was great.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so we are going to get into the sermon, and this was week 2 of What's Your Next is the sermon series, and this one was about living. Last week was about loving Christ. This one is about living for Christ. And a couple of the comments you made was, number one, that, the devoted influence their world for Jesus.
So can I make a small adjustment? Because I know I say it sometimes, and I'm having to recorrect myself. It's not living for Christ, it's living Christ. And there's a significant difference between the two, because you can do all kinds of things for Jesus. Like I can do my quiet time for Jesus. But when you live Christ, it's that you're trying to be like him and live out what you've collected live out his love everywhere that you go, versus I'm just doing it for Jesus. It's like, go do it for the Gipper. Like no. We want to let Christ live through us. So there's a bit of a distinction in living for or living Christ. And I know I say both, but just correcting myself here. So
okay, thank you for clarifying that. I will no longer live for Christ. I will only live Christ. So
don't you think that?
Can I live in Christ?
Sure. You
okay.
can do all of it.
I will. Okay.
I'm just saying for our mission statement.
I'm such a jerk, but
you're just going to confuse
Nancy
everyone.
reminds me of that all the time. So,
good. I don't need to do it.
Yeah, no, don't pile on. Okay, so the devoted, especially devoted to Christ, influence their world for Jesus. And so the question was, what is your next in living Christ? And one of the things you brought up was your next may be in ministry. And so there's a couple of facets we want to hit here, but one of the things you brought up that story of way back when Sharon and Ike were the pastor and his wife here, and she hit me up that one Sunday and said, hey, we need somebody to take over the usher greeter ministry and kind of organize the volunteers and run that. She said, would you pray about doing that? And I said, sure. I was like, I felt like I was pretty new to the church at that point, and I was just kind of like, more like, oh, this is scary. Sure, I'll pray for it. And then, as God will do, I didn't pray for it all week, and then showed up the next week, and my name was in the bulletin. Hey, if you want, we need ushers and greeters. Contact Brent. And,
voluntold.
And so you can volunteer or be voluntold, and so I just thought that was humorous, but it just kind of, for me, wanted to just kind of hear your guys' stories about how you got into ministry.
Wait,
really.
what happened after that? Like, what was your spirit? What was your next kind of journey in? Because you're a pastor
anything?
now, so
yeah. I mean, my journey into ministry, and I mean, there is that part about just doing ministry, whether it be in a church or out of a church, and then vocational ministry. It's just a weird series of events. I mean, I gave my life to the Lord in high school, and shortly after that, I joined a Christian heavy metal band. Yes, and so I mean, we called ourselves heavy metal ministers, and we were going to change the world, and I knew at that point, I was just so excited to serve Christ, and I was excited about my faith, and I wanted to be in ministry. And I remember telling people at that time, this was like probably right after my senior year in high school, I said, I don't think I want to be like the pastor of a church, but I want to be in ministry, and then Nancy and I kind of as we had kids and trying to figure out careers, we kind of had a time where we kind of stepped back from our faith a little bit and wasn't really living it out and just kind of meandering around. And then after we came back to the church and when we came to Olive Branch and started growing in our faith, we started to get plugged in serving.
And you were voluntold.
Yeah. And then when you came on as the youth guy and the youth pastor, and we were youth leaders, and we just kept getting more and more involved in ministry. And then I hated my job. I'd only had it for like 5 or 6 years, but just could not deal with the owner at all. And just, it was just one of those where Fridays you're like, I've been set free. And then, Saturday mornings you're like, Monday morning's really close. And you're just like, your stomach is just tied up thinking about going to work on Monday. And I remember that you had asked me if I would kind of take over something that you wanted to develop. And it was like this connections ministry where we connect with new guests and new believers. And so I started volunteering. And then I was volunteering like probably close to 20 hours a week. And then you guys came to me and said, I really like what you're doing. Would you come on part-time? And I was like, sure. And then I came on part-time, and then that led to full-time ministry here at Olive Branch. And I just remembered that at one point I'm sitting at my desk, because from the time I was 18 and 19 wanting to do ministry and then falling away a bit, and then in my 30s, really just coming back to the Lord and coming here. And I remembered sitting at my desk one day working here at Olive Branch thinking, wow, God gave me the desire of my heart to serve in ministry, and I didn't really connect those dots. It just kind of seemed like they were two separate things. And then one day I'm like, I used to really desire this and pray for this, and then there was that period where I didn't, and then I had it. And I do believe this, though. if I would have went into ministry at that time back then, I think it would have ruined me in one sense, and probably I would have ruined whatever, because I just was not ready for it at all, And
so it was simply following that kind of those, what was the next thing to serve in, and so by taking the risk and taking the chance, you found yourself where you're at. Like, is that similar? I don't know how it, for.
Thank you, Siri.
So I mean, similar fine for you, because I mean.
So the question is what exactly? Because I just been in church my whole life. So is the question, when did I want to be in ministry, or?
Well, just like, what was your experience of going from, like, you were going to church your whole life to suddenly you found yourself, like, I know that you had a pastor pull you in and you started kind of becoming part of the leadership, and since, like,
yeah,
that's pretty young for you.
It goes back to even younger. Like, I remember the first time a pastor was preaching, I got up when I was 2 on the pew and pointed and said, I want to do that. My mom was like, okay, that's weird. So from that point, I was always interested as a young child in the Bible and stuff. So that's kind of the first kind of recognition that I've just liked being around churches or being in churches, was when I was really young. Over the years, I've tried to always follow a pastor around of some kind, and ask questions ever since I was a kid, just curious. And like I said, it started with the children's pastor for a while, and then her having me go, yeah, I think you can help. And instead of participating in VBS, I was helping VBS as a young kid. And then later, when I was 13, I wanted to be in the youth leadership, and I was the youngest, and they were like, no. And I was like, but I kind of want to be. So I kind of had to prove that I wanted to do that. And they said, yeah, okay, we'll let you. And then I had to kind of prove myself there. But the first,
you kind of had to open some doors.
I had yourself to do, well, first it was like, just, I want to, everybody keeps telling me no. So, okay. And then I got into ministry, and then, disappointments happen, and, you think you're going to be in this ministry. I was told I wasn't. And then I was like, I don't want anything to do with this. So I tried to do everything but do that. And then when I was in the Air Force, people were knocking on my door wanting to start a Bible study for some reason. I was like, go away. And so at first it was wanting it, then being told no too many times, and then going, I can't really see myself doing anything else. And then every time I've even tried to run from it, there's some remnant of the church that needs help, or I know that I feel prompted to help that direction, then I end up inevitably in some kind of leadership position because I've been around the church long. It's hard for me to see people hurting or going through difficulties and knowing that you can help, and you just don't want to. So to me, it was like that. And then later on, it's just like, I can't really see myself doing anything else.
Well, and your journey, even here at Olive Branch, wasn't linear, in the sense that you came and we hung out and you started volunteering and helping me with the services. And suddenly you were invested in doing, like, kind of this service position where you were ordering and organizing what was going on.
Yeah, I just stepped out of ministry when I came back to California, and didn't really want to do it anymore. Was going to college, and then my mom was like, "You should talk to Greg. You guys have a long time." I was like, "I don't want to talk to Greg, because then I'll be doing ministry again or whatever." And so
and here we are.
And so here I am. So eventually I did talk to you, but that's how.
Prophet.
But for me, it was like, I know that being in ministry is difficult. And I know that, like, that's why it's easier to just volunteer for things. Like, if I could just volunteer for things, that would be so much less stress. But you feel like, I got to give, there's only a certain amount of time that you have in your life to contribute to what's coming. And if you believe it's coming, you can invest your life in the wrong thing. And the one thing about church is that, as hard as it is, it's not an unworthy investment of your time, your energy, because you're investing in people and in eternal significant things. So for some people, I've seen their whole life change, because their whole life they were told all you're good enough for is, being a waiter, like that's a bad thing or anything. But they didn't feel like they were contributing to anything in society that felt like it made a difference in people's lives. And they just volunteer for the church. And so that became a means to make money, but being the church became a means to be significant to the kingdom, to contribute to what God has done for them. And that's nice to watch and facilitate for people who their eyes open up and go, oh, it's not all about me. Oh, this has way more significance. I don't feel like my life. That's why a lot of people that volunteer are the poorest or the people who have the least resources, or you feel like, oh, well, why would this person, well, you would want that guy to volunteer. He's got 12 businesses. Well, that guy's busy, right? So usually people who see the value of it are usually the ones that have been told they had no value for many years. So there's always significance no matter what. If you're a single mom or anything like that, the church is a place for you to use your gifts. And it might not be what you think it is, but it's very creative in finding out how to use them. So,
yeah, my journey, people don't really know. I didn't go to Olive Branch all my life, right? So it was, I actually gave my life to Christ in my senior year of high school.
Me too.
Like, it was kind of finally there that it solidified. I had gone to church as a kid, and we had kind of left for various reasons. But I never did ministry. I never had volunteered or was involved in anything. And then when I gave my life to Christ, I was at Crossroads at the time, and because that's where my family had grown up. And so immediately I'm just kind of there hanging out, and it's suddenly they found it, after a little while of kind of listening and getting discipled, it was like a few months or so in, they were like, hey, you can sing. Hey, jump on the worship team. And so I was like, okay, I like singing. So I jumped on the worship team, and I was a part of that. And then eventually, for some reason, by the time I was graduated, they were like, hey, run the worship team for the junior high. And so I gave that a shot, and it went okay. Found out that I got a lot to learn about music, about bands that I didn't know. I could sing, but I couldn't really guide the band in the way that I wanted. And we did okay for a little while. And then what I really wanted to do, though, was like, hey, make me the game guy. So I switched over to the game guy. They brought up a different band. And me and another guy, we ran the games. And at the meantime, the drama team opened up at the church. And I was like, well, I'll do that. And I jumped into one of the drama productions, and they didn't let me in that. So I ended up doing lights for the drama production. And then suddenly, okay, now I got a little small part as like little tiny plays here and there, little kind of skits and things like that. And then next thing I know, I'm a youth leader. I'm discipling some boys by the time I'm a couple of years in, because somebody asked me, hey, would you disciple me? And I'm like, oh, okay. So we started doing that. Next thing I know, I'm discipling, and I'm in a college group, and I'm getting a chance to talk and to give my first kind of like conversational message in a small group. And then they asked me to do it in one of the services for youth. And so I got that chance, and it was kind of this like slow build of like, well, how about this? Yeah. How about that? Yeah. But the whole time I was with a group of friends that we were like, we're not going to be pastors. Like, that we're just going to do ministry, and we're going to do it well out in the world. Like, I'm the opposite. Like, I never felt like I needed to be a pastor. I never felt like that would be the thing I'd want to do. I was going to do engineering, write books, make impact, do things like that. And so then it took my friends sitting me down going like, look, you're not an engineer. You need to be a pastor. And I'm still like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then it was, for me, it was a vision I had, and I've talked about that before. And that was like, I can't ignore this anymore. And so I stepped into I stepped away from my college into ministry life, in a sense. Like, I started going to Biola, and I was volunteering still in the youth ministry as a youth leader. But to be quite honest, it was like, that was it. I didn't have any prospects for a job or anything like that. I was the janitor at Chuck Swindoll's Insight for Living. That's the job I wound up with. And then suddenly my youth guy there, Doug, he's like, why are you doing that? I can pay you that much money. I was making like $400 or something a month. He's like, I can pay you that. Just do our youth interning. And so wound up their first paid youth intern. And then 6 months later, I found it. They were going to get rid of that. And I wound up here at Olive Branch. It was June of 2000. I think I got paid almost a little bit more than $400. I think it was like $650 a month or something like that.
But now that you're senior pastor, you're making almost $800 a month.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
That's a big, woo! Yeah. I mean, that's almost double what you started with.
But even ending up as the senior pastor wasn't like a choice. It was like something thrown at me, and it was it was a choice, but it was like, well, do I take this next? It's what's in front of me. It's what's next. And I think that's kind of my point, is in all of our lives, there was just kind of these like, we didn't resist necessarily the next step when it really showed itself. And unless you consider me doing that and God just smacking me over the head. But
well, I don't know. I resisted it, but it was ridiculous to do so.
Right. And I think that's the case for most people. Like, when I think about if there's a next for you in ministry, I think most people kind of know. It's like, I should volunteer. And there's a sense of like a struggle with sacrifice in some ways. Would you agree with that, Brent? I think you brought that up when we were talking about it.
Yeah, and it kind of felt, when we were talking, it kind of fell into the whole generosity discussion, whether it be serving, whether it be giving, whether it be, I do believe that for the most part, most people want to be generous. They want to serve, they want to get involved, but they have no margin in their calendar.
Would you say most people or most Americans, most Christians, like when you talk about generosity?
I'm probably more specifically talking about Christians, and not saying that if you're not a Christian, you're not generous, but I think a lot of times if you're just living your life apart from the church and apart from a relationship with God, you're filling your time, and this I'm
volunteering at your sports team.
This is a broad stroke, and so it's not totally legitimate. But you're filling your time, because I know this is what I would do, is filling my time with TV and going to the movies and entertainment and stuff like that, and not necessarily be driving to serve somewhere or to sacrifice for something. And maybe there are a lot of people who get involved with coaching their kids' soccer teams or baseball teams. I get that. But again, I think that for the most part, people want to be generous, but they just don't have the margin in their schedules and their calendars where they want to give and be generous that way, but they don't have any margin in their finances and whatnot too. And so I do think there's that element of trying to either find margin where you can do those things and fulfill those desires to be more, to serve more and give more or whatever, or make margins in your schedule or your budgets, and just going, okay, I'm going to stop this so that I can do this. And so I think that's where the rub comes in. Because, and again, I don't want this to sound like a critique, but I think sometimes people want to give, or people want to serve, but the sacrifice of doing that is a roadblock. And what I mean is, they want to do it as long as it's really convenient.
Yeah,
for
I
them.
know that feeling, like having desires and drives in my own life for like maybe writing, or maybe just getting that exercise or whatever, but let alone like volunteering at the church, things like that. Man, if I look at my schedule, it's like, well, if I'm really going to do that, I'm going to have to get up at 5 a.m, or I'm going to have to like make myself hurt. Like my body's going to hurt when I do this. And I've been trying to keep up an exercise regimen, and legitimately you have to, every time you start to go off, goes, oh, I just got to do this. I got to sacrifice the comfort and the convenience for the time that it's going to take, for the way I'm going to feel at the beginning. But then, so there is definitely that sacrifice aspect that you're talking about.
Yeah. And I mean, and I see it to some degree. And again, I just want to be clear. I don't want this to sound like a criticism of people, but my wife plays on. When you say something and say "but," it just kind of wiped away everything you just said. But people go, oh, I want to serve, and where do you want to serve? I want to serve wherever there's a need. Okay, we really have a need in this position at the 11:30 service. We go to the 10 o'clock service, and it's like, okay, yeah, I will, as long as it's really convenient for me, and so part of it is like, okay, I mean, so there's a lot of things that we do around our households that aren't convenient, but we want to be part of the household. And so I would just encourage people, to find out where those time needs are, because I know each ministry is a little different as to where they're starving to death, and maybe step out of your comfort zone and serve at a different service, or serve one and go to the other one. But boom, I got quiet.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm good with that. That's just, it's a challenge. I get it. And the next is always going to be a challenge, especially if you're adding. So, but definitely want to encourage people to not take that next, to ignore that step God may be calling you to in ministry, because that is probably one of those places of a journey that I think a lot of people don't realize how much meaning can come, like Stephen was talking about, just the value that comes in with being able to give yourself away to other people and use your gift to see other people cared for and to actually make an impact. I don't think people realize how much of an impact they can make with just a simple one.
And you had said people think the next thing is another thing to add on to their schedule, and sometimes it's not another thing. Sometimes it's letting go of one and taking steps. And I will say though, we and I know you, Greg, really have a strong opinion of this too. I mean, we don't want to say no for people, allow them to say no. But I also know that that we have a culture here too where we have had to tell people, like, they're volunteering. It's like, okay, wait a minute.
You're doing too
you
many
are
things.
Involved in so many things. We don't want to overwhelm you and burn you out. So we want to protect you too, So again, it's not like keep serving and serve more and do more. Part of it is, doing it to where maybe it's outside of your comfort zone or convenience zone, but it's not going to overwhelm you, in that part.
Yeah, I would just say sometimes it's hard to think of these as something that isn't abstract, because you're thinking like, I have a bunch of to-dos to do. But the question really is what do you want your entire life, ministry, everything you're doing to be about? And sometimes that does require a little bit of steps in order to get to a place where you see that it's actually worth doing. So like I still to this day, pastor shows up at my door, knocks on the door and says, come with me. As a 13-year-old, I was like, okay, whatever. So I went, I have no idea what we're doing. And he took me to clean someone's, to mow someone's front lawn. I didn't even know the person. And you're like, what's the point of this? And then you come to find out it was a widow, that needed help. And then you're like, and I was the one that was available to help that person. And when you start seeing that, like, oh, okay, I want to live in a place where people treat each other kindly. Well, that's a place that people who sacrifice have to make. And so sometimes you're not going to see the outcome in this generation.
What do you think would have happened had you said, no, you're not going to go?
I think he would have had to do either the whole thing for himself or couldn't finish the product because he was a pastor, he's busy. So me helping was able to allow him to preach probably, but also for me to actually immediately help someone when they were in need.
What do you think would have happened inside of you had you not going? What would have been like? Would something have? Because you've mentioned this before. It seems like a pretty seminal direction change.
I think it's okay to just like I think we need to get into a place where we're willing to plant and not see even the outcome. And so people often do this as, why do certain people come to the United States and do well? Well, it's usually, if you look, it's a parent that said, I want to leave the world better for my kids, and I'm not going to see the outcome in my lifetime until maybe later, if at all. But I'm willing to do it because I feel like I want to leave the world a better place. So their kids get way more opportunities because someone else sacrificed. I don't think the church is any different. I do think it's going to take faithful people to say, I'm going to get rewarded in heaven. I'll probably see some results here on earth, but I feel it's significant that I want to make a world or a place that represents the world that I want to go to when I die. So you have to think like eternally in order to believe that what you're doing has value. If you're waiting for a return on investment now, you may not see it and you wouldn't do it. But if you actually believe that those places need to exist, then sometimes you have to make that sacrifice. And I think that's what Christ did. I think in a way Christ is with us always, but he left his mortal body and let the church be who it was. And I'm sure they wanted desperately to bring Christ back. You know what I mean? They were spending time with him, but they were like, no, I have to invest. And once my investment of the church will bring about the end of Christ's return. And that must have been hard because you had that fellowship with God. You saw what it felt like. And now you're creating a future world where everybody's participating. They felt it was worthy to sacrifice and may not have seen the full outcome of the full growth of the church, the early disciples.
I mean, we sit in the same place as if we're willing to do those same things. we see the outcome being radically different for our world.
That's what you talked about Thomas Aquinas' mom. It's like,
or you mean Augustine?
Augustine's mom. Yeah, Augustine's mom.
Augustine. Augustine. Augustine.
However you pronounce it. Choose to pronounce it. Tomato. But like, I would say that a lot of people feel like, what do I have to contribute? You teach the child that's in front of you about the values. You introduce them to a community and show them the values. That's how I became a minister, because my mom brought me to church. So that's kind of the reason why I'm here. I wouldn't have known, and that has major contribution to the body of Christ. So.
Yeah. What would you say to parents? And I've heard people say this oftentimes, is they don't make their kids go to church if they don't want to, because they don't want to turn their hearts against God and the church by forcing them to go to church when they don't want to.
I'm going to say they need to go get counseling on why they feel like they were forced as a child to go to church and why that affected them so deeply, because that sounds like a parent problem.
No, that's parents saying that.
No, I know. Okay. I'm saying that sounds like the parent's problem. They are interpreting how their child is going to take it before they've even tried. It's like a self-fulfilled prophecy is what's going on. And I would say that sounds like hurt to me. That sounds like somebody who is deathly afraid of having something happen to them, to their children, that happened to them. Mm-hmm. And so I would go deal with that. I would go kind of sit down and do some real serious self-reflection, because it sounds like somebody who might have been abused at a church, spiritually speaking, or in a cult of some kind, where it was about you had to go, the iron fist of church upon you. Mm-hmm. Look, there are going to be kids who don't want to go to church, but that doesn't mean that doesn't open a dialogue of reason. Like, well, let's talk about that. You're raising adults. You're not raising future children. So you want to be able to, first, children don't get a choice in some things. If you're a Christian, you go. That's who you are. That's what you do. Guess what? Christians take their children to church. It's part of the mandate that we say in Scripture, that you fathers bring up your children according to the Lord, right? Mm-hmm. This is a command given to parents. It's disobedient as a Christian parent to not take your kids to church, first. Second, if they're older and they're pushing back, then have those discipleship conversations. Right. Talk about, okay, what is it about church that you don't like? What is it about the faith that's got you confused? I think it's a cop-out, fear-based move, that because you're afraid you're not going to be able to stand up to your own children's questioning. Or their feelings. Children's feelings are raw. They need to be discipled as much as their thoughts need to be discipled. And so, disciple them, enter into the conversation. So, I mean, those are some of my base reactions. But
and that question popped in my head when Steve was saying, I did this because my mom took me to church, and it just struck that chord in me. But I also feel like
what is Steven? Steven's the one who got taken to church and made to go. So
I didn't.
I never wanted not to be there. I wouldn't know that unless my mom brought me there, right? So I was raised like the thing about it is like there's a difference between making someone go to church and making them a Christian against their will. And I think that's what parents confuse. You're a Christian, and so we're going to act like Christians. Okay, whoa. I'm taking you to church because I'm your parent and I'm a Christian and I want you with me. So that's different than you're a Christian, you're going to act like a Christian. Well, they didn't make a profession of faith, but I can say this is my household. We operate this when you have your household.
That's a good distinction of what I was meaning.
Yeah, you operate in the way you want, but this is how it is for everybody's family. There are a lot of people who want to go to church more, and their parents are like, find your own way there. I don't care, because they're atheists and they don't want their kids to go to church, or they have a different religion. So there's the difference. Also, I would say there's a little bit of a different distinction if your kids are like 18 or 17 and you just came to the faith, right? Because you raised them one way and now you're pivoting another. But I wouldn't even say that was necessarily negative. I would contribute to the fact that while I'm your parent and you're in this household, I want you to be with me. And you don't have to believe. I'm not forcing you to believe, but I want you with me because I'm your parent.
Again, I think I would distinguish between a post 14-year-old and a pre 14-year-old, and the idea there of being like, if you want your child to really have a decision about whether they want to go to church or not, the only way they can do that is by taking them to church.
And
they will always deny what they do not know. Come on, do you want to eat this really yummy thing? I don't want to eat that. What is it? I've never tasted it before. It's like having a pre-decision. That's called prejudice. And you're teaching children prejudice. Because why wouldn't you say you're a Christian? Why wouldn't you want to take me? You're prejudicing your children to something. That's a really strange thing for a Christian to do.
And I do look at it as a parent's role. We are supposed to do what is best for our children, and whether they want to do it or not. And just like I don't know any parent that would have that same attitude toward eating vegetables, with your meals, and not just eating candy and donuts for every meal. It's like, no, you're going to eat some vegetables, but I don't like vegetables. Okay. Well, then, if you're not comfortable with vegetables, then by all means, go back to eating donuts and candy for dinner.
I'll give you a different scenario. When my mom was young, she took me to college with her, and I had to sit there because there was no babysitting in that time period, and it was boring. But she had to do that because she needed to go to school, because she needed to learn, and she had no one to watch me, so I went. That scenario, no one would say, how dare you bring your kid to college with you or whatever. It's like, hey, if you feel like you're the parent, and in order to be a good parent, you need to go to church, then your kids need to accommodate that so that you can be a better parent to them. So letting them know why, like, this is going to be boring for you. You might not like it. You might like it. You might find you have friends. You might find they're not as scary as you want. But while I'm your parent, this is what I need to do in order to grow to be a better parent for you. So this is what we're going to do. So I feel like having that conversation is different than having like, I'm never going to say, you must do this belief thing now and go through, make them take communion or do something weird against their will. That's where I find that people are in therapy for abuse. They're in therapy for abuse because someone told them what to believe and not gave them the option of evangelizing to their child. So.
All right, so we're going to move on, and we did get we had asked right before New Year's when we recorded that one, hey, people, send us, what your favorite memory was from the rabbit trail, or, your favorite sermon series and how it affected you over the last year. And I just got one from Jim Aaron. And hey, Jim. And so he said for his memory for the favorite sermon was Mind the Gap when we did that. Do you remember what month we did that?
Oh, that was January.
That was January?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. January of last year. So he said Mind the Gap, specifically the second one, Trouble in the Gap, exploring again how the resurrection changes everything. Yes, I have an inheritance, a new life without sin. It awaits me. But today, as I mind the gap, I can promote a living hope in people I'm fortunate to come in contact with. Thank you, Pastor Greg. So that was his
cool.
Sermon that he really reflected on. So, and then we're going to get to a couple of questions here. One of the questions I have, and I just, it's not necessarily a question, it's more of just like, what are your opinions? So I was scrolling through social media the other day, and I came across a little video short, and I don't remember who it was. I don't remember if it was just a Christian guy or if it was a pastor, but he went on to say that the Bible is clear that fornication, adultery, murder are absolutely a sin, and that it's not controversial to say that. And most Christ followers, when they hear this, in fact, would completely agree with that. But it troubled him that many of these same people who would say they believe that it is evil and it is sin, will pay to watch movies or TV shows that depict these things. And so they're watching and paying money to be entertained by sin. What say you?
I mean, it's a loaded question to me. I don't know if everyone who's seeing a movie that has those things in it is seeing it for those reasons and is enjoying those aspects of the movie. Man, you ask most people why some people are, then that is disturbing.
Well, if you said, okay, I'm going to go to the movies and see this action movie, and there was really no action in it, would you walk out going, oh, that was kind of disappointing?
But I'm not going to now. If I went to a movie where the whole point of the movie is to just talk about murder for fun, that would be different. If there's murder in a story, then I don't necessarily see that as the same as the motive for saying it. Like when I go to watch a murder mystery, I'm not being like, well, I love murder. Even though you might even say it, like, I like to watch murder mysteries. You like the detective part of it. Someone dies and they're like, who did this? And so I don't know if everyone's going to a movie, at least to themselves, most people are doing it for that reason. It is the reason why I don't like what's called horror porn, which is just you revel in the visceral graphic nature of the death. And that's the whole point of the movie. That would be the reason you would see a movie like that. And I would avoid those movies because I think that does something to you.
It's like real porn, which the point is not the story.
It's a desensitization. It's the acts that you want to see portrayed. Now, that's what I said. If you're going to see those acts, that says more about you, though. I mean, if that were the case, I wouldn't be able to read my Bible. There's a lot of murder and rape and stuff in the Bible. And so to me, you have to, I think the problem with us as Christians is we think we're going for one reason and we don't see the effect of the other. Right?
So, and I think that there's a point at which sometimes you go to a movie and you don't know what you're getting.
Yeah.
Like Ocean's 11. I think Ocean's 11's an interesting case subject, right? Because the issue with Ocean's 11 is you go in there thinking, oh, this is some kind of like heist thing. What's going to happen? And what you discover is, oh, the good guys are the ones robbing. They're almost like they're trying to be like a Robin Hood-esque kind of thing.
Yeah.
But in the end, you're like, these guys are just thieves. They're just robbers. They're literally causing all this stuff to go on. And that's just, you're like, in the end, did I just root for bad guys? That is a different subject.
It is interesting. I read a story on Ocean's 11, and these guys are bad guys. They're robbers, they're criminals, and they go and they rob this casino and stuff like that. And originally, they were going to just walk away with the money. But at that time, the Hollywood was like, no, the bad guys can't win. So that you can't just have them walk out with the money.
This is the
and
original
they got
Ocean's 11.
Yeah, the original one.
The Rat Pack version?
The Rat Pack version,
Rat Pack version, I mean,
in what, the 50s or 60s or whatever? And so it was like, no, the bad guy can't win. So they kind of tweaked the story where it was more of a generous, Robin Hood, like you said, scenario rather than just that. And that was really just to get past the censors.
Yeah, and that's pretty funny.
We're going to show some morality just so that we can show immorality.
As Christians, we do need to be concerned about the morality aspect. Like, there's Breaking Bad's another interesting one. So people who haven't seen Breaking Bad, it's about basically the destruction of a chemistry teacher because he's trying to make money, so he starts making drugs. And there's no redemptive arc. And yet at the same time, you could say, well, this is a Saul story. This is and so here's my point, is that seems like an interesting argument until you apply it to the Bible. Read that and then here, let me see this.
Well, in Breaking Bad, and I've never seen Breaking Bad, but if I remember the storyline, even though he did something bad, they made it seem virtuous because he had cancer, he was going to die, he was going to just do this for a short time to get money so that his wife would be taken care of when he passed. If I remember, that was kind of the storyline.
That was
the beginning.
Setup, but it's the whole story in the end is just how despicable of a human he becomes.
Yeah.
Well, the whole point of the story is to show that a normal person who everybody thinks is good could go really bad.
Yeah.
So you could read it this way: it is not controversial to Christ followers to hear that adultery, murder, and fornication are absolutely sin. In fact, they'd agree. But it troubled him that many of these same people watch movies, TV shows, etc., that depict these things, and you pay money to be entertained by these things. Well, let's just put it this way: it troubled him that many of these same people read the Bible that depict these things, and they pay money to buy those Bibles and read that with a joy of being entertained by these sins. What do you say? I say, welcome to the reality of human life, that the Bible depicts these things even, and the difference in the biblical story and say some things that are out there is, what is the point of the depiction? The point of the depiction is the case of whether or not you should give something your money. There's lots of movies I have not gone and seen, and there are lots of things I have not gone and done because it doesn't have the point that I would say is a Christian point to it. And so, I think a lot of Christians don't think through their movie choices or music choices or whatnot. And I do think that we need to be careful. This is why having a good Christian worldview and to be able to evaluate culture and art is important, because there are some things that we throw out that we should never throw out. They're good. They're good. They're really bad guys in that. But guess what? Satan's the worst bad guy you can get in all of writing, and he does some pretty horrendous things.
The dirty little secret, though, is nobody thinks they're the villain. So oftentimes, making a villain sympathetic is a way of getting you to see you could be a villain. Or it could be a way of, like some of these movies that have come out recently, where you're excusing away the villain because no one is truly responsible for their behavior. The difference is in the worldview of the artist and what the film is trying to say. A good one is like Cruella de Vil, to me, kills puppies to make jackets out of them, and then you give her this like sympathetic backstory. I was like, well, it doesn't really matter. I get that bad things happen to you. I don't think it justifies killing puppies. So to me, is this one of those things where, what are you trying to say? And people go, oh, it's art, you're not supposed to ask questions. Like, no, I have lots of questions now, because like literally I don't see how you can tell kids, yeah, she's fine now because she has a reason for killing puppies. So like, we need a conversation about like, what are the values of this film where we're taking a bad guy that you're trying to make a solid dark villain, which is no nuance to the old Disney films. It was just like, these are bad and these are good, because
in fact she's named the Cruel Devil.
Right. And then you go, well, here's really how they're complicated. I'm like, okay, I'm with you, because people justify that. You can empathize with a bad person without justifying their behavior. I can relate to why someone would do something even though it's not a good thing to do, and I could still call it bad. One is me giving mercy and not excusing behavior, but the other one is saying like, oh, this is just great. She's now you understand why she kills puppies or whatever. No,
turns them into coats.
Yeah, I don't. No, that's not a thing that I want to do. Like, and you can play it all fair and neat and cute and stuff, but in the end, I don't understand many modern movies' fixations with not just making the villain sympathetic and really good, giving you a different point of view, but really turning them into doing the same things they did in the original story, but just now giving them more complex reasons.
Now, let me ask you this too, because I do feel like there's been a shift, and because back in the day, in the 30s and 40s and maybe even the 50s, that there was the hero and the anti-hero, the villain and the good guy, and the good guy always won. When was it, the 60s or the 70s, where they kind of came into that anti-hero thing, where the hero was flawed and he wasn't necessarily really good person. I
don't know. It's been going on for a while. I don't know where in literature it starts. Usually it starts, just going all the way back to like early French literature had libertine thoughts, where people, because they feel, should follow their feelings, and you should never question your feelings. And if you have legitimate feelings, and then it's a good thing to explore them, right? And no one should ever question you. I think that's really where it starts for many of the things, because no one wants to be called good or bad. But when you write a story, you have to have a good or bad to have conflict. So as soon as you say like, well, no one's really a villain, everybody's good, well, then you have no story.
Well,
you're just people running around justifying whatever they do.
Looking through very old Greek plays, the Iliad, the Odyssey, which are poems, and then the Greek plays. Where did they come from? They come from paganism.
Yeah.
When you don't have a Christian arc, even your good guys are bad guys and your bad guys are good guys, because your gods are bad and good. And so it's just an amalgam of who's got the power. And that's really what you see in most of those kind of cases that we're getting to, where it's all power-based movie films. It's all power, human self-help and virtuous stuff is put in the background. So it's tough. It's just where we've returned to a lot of pagan themes. I think we're everything I'm reading and hearing about right now is arcing back towards the desire for the hero and the desire for the redemption story again. It's just the human heart longs for it. We can't stay with Saul forever. We got to have David. Right. So,
all right, cool. Now we're running out of time to get through a couple of these questions from Debbie. And like I said earlier, I think she's going through her reading her Bible in a year thing, because it's all Genesis and Exodus. But we'll take two of the first ones from the Genesis. And so she says, Genesis 1:29. God gives them plants for food. Then in Genesis 4, Abel has flocks. Then in Genesis 9, everything that lives and moves about will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. So did Cain and Abel eat meat? So
yes.
Yes?
Yeah, Cain and Abel eat meat.
Cain's was chicken. chicken tenders, right?
You stop by McDonald's. No, I mean, the meat was allowed during this text is the one that is even talking about specifically. They're also outside of the Garden of Eden. When you go back to, I'm going to say this, but you go ahead and clarify because I don't want to open this up because this can go in many different directions. But back to Genesis 1:29, there was a different edict. There's this belief that oftentimes when modern readers think that Eden and the Garden of Eden was the whole earth. And I just want to dispel that. To me, I don't see that in the text.
No, it's not. It's very clearly a region where a mountain is the headwaters of 4
There's
rivers.
Eden and a Garden of Eden and a hill and so that's a separate place that God is wanting Adam and Eve to expand out to the rest of the world. That's their be fruitful and multiply, bring everything into Eden. So there is a contrast to what's going on outside of Eden and inside of Eden. And the reason why I say that is because here in this text, we're outside of Eden now. We're in the place where the animals and the plants are fighting, and whatever's happened as a result.
The plants are fighting?
Yeah, well, plants.
Wow.
Have you seen Venus
Have you
flytrap?
seen? Yeah.
Yes.
But you have thorns
Vines,
and
Little
vines.
Shop of Horrors.
Yeah, it just becomes a picture of the fall, and this world is more chaotic as a result. And in that world, you're getting this particular idea. Okay, it's okay for you to have to bring everything under the dominion of taking the chaos and making it controlled, including the animals that are wild as well, and the ones that are of certain kind you can eat. And that would have been a new edict for them, and how I read Genesis 1:29. Anything else you want to add to that?
I think that, it's not necessary. I think the danger is that some people want to use this to foster, like, you must be vegetarian. But
Right.
So remember that Jesus ate meat, and Jesus would have eaten lamb.
Fish for sure.
Fish for sure. He's at least a pescatarian.
After he's resurrected body, he's eating fish.
Right. And there's a very real sense that meat was a known staple. You eat. God dictates that they were to eat the sacrifices. So it's hard to believe that Cain or Abel was sacrificing animals and not eating them.
Yeah.
Because that's what has to happen. He's not just
most
bringing
of
them
the
up and
time.
going, here you go, God, have my little lamb. He was killing them. And so it would be either, I think that's more egregious, that the Bible seems to be indicating, oh, they just killed animals to kill them for God, but they didn't eat them for any reason at all. And so there's leaning tendency to go, no, they were eating these fruit, these things that they were offering over to the Lord, because that's how that would have been understood by a Jewish mind when you come to a sacrifice. So,
And there's a lot of animal sacrifice in the Old Testament.
but in the garden, no, animals were not eaten, and God then gives the full permission across the world that it's like, okay, you can
now
eat
that you're out of Eden as well.
So let me ask you this.
in the new creation. It's a new creation mandate too after Noah.
So God says you can eat anything that crawls, which would include bugs, and anything that is on the earth it's just like plants. You can eat it all. And so now then you've got all these laws, of unclean and clean food. So where the Jewish people would say you can't eat pork, you can't eat shellfish, you can't eat these certain bugs, when God said you can eat everything. So where did that break come from? Did God give a different mandate to them, or did they just make their own rules?
So in Eden, only plants, those kinds of things. Post Eden in the fall, they ate everything. Then he says, eat it all. And then when it comes to Israel, it's like, you guys are going to look different. People are now eating things, especially pork was used a lot in idols and sacrifices and stuff like that. So they debate. Scholars don't have any real strong idea about why all these animals are chosen the way that they are. However, they do have a tendency to kind of line up around what they would call kind of like you're not eating things that eat dead things, or you're not eating things that eat the slop, the feces and the junk. Pigs will eat everything.
Scavengers and things.
You don't eat scavengers. So it seems like all the fish are okay, but all of the bottom dwellers in the sea are not. It seems that all the animals that eat other animals, in certain cases where it's just they're out predatorily killing, that's one thing. But if they're eating the dead animal, they're the scavenger that comes along and just picks it up and eats it, like a carrion bird. No, you can't eat those. So there seems to be a dividing line between somehow they viewed them as connected to the demonic and connected to death. These two things, so demonic being connected to idols, connected to the Canaanite religions, and death connected to that which makes you impure. It just kind of, you would be like, ugh, you ate that? What? Kind of a thing. And so, and that would make you unclean, unable to worship God. Now, that didn't mean that you were sinned and now you were doomed. They might kick you out of the community until you cleaned up and stopped eating that way. But there wasn't, it's not the way that they do it today, for sure.
I just think a lot of people look at the ceremonial laws, and they are part, when you get to by the time you get to Exodus, you're dealing with a particular people at a particular time in history trying to do a particular thing that later on isn't required later, in our day. And part of that is to separate yourself from what other people are practicing. So some things are going to be specific to the particular culture to separate themselves from what other people are doing. The question is it an edict for all of us to eat a certain way? And that would be to miss the understanding of what's taking place at the time. If I'm going through exile, or if I'm going through, not exile, but if I'm going through the wilderness and I'm living in Israel and there's all these pagan beliefs that are doing specific things, and God's like, that's going to lead you down a path. I want you to look and act different, to be distinct. These are the reasons why some of these ceremonial laws are there. And they do have some health benefits for sure, but also it's to distinguish them from what the practices are going around them, which is different on what's going on with Cain and Abel at that time as well. So,
and we'll get into the second question. So Debbie came in this morning and just threw like 3 pages of handwritten notes for the questions on my desk. And I'm saying that because I just want to remind all you guys out there that, listen, if you're in service on a Sunday and you have trouble remembering to rabbit trail us with questions, you can always just write a note, while you're here on church, and drop it in the offering box. Just say rabbit trail question. It'll get to us, and we can do your questions that way. But Debbie asks also on Genesis chapter 3, verse 9, does Genesis 3:9 actually mean, where are you? Why are you where you are, instead of just where are you? So, how does the real reading look? Is God saying, hey, where are you? Or is he saying, why are you where you are?
This is Genesis chapter 3, verse 9.
Yeah.
So I think this is getting at, what does the wooden literal statement state? And if it's the wooden literally, it reads, where are you?
Yeah, like if you were to read it in Hebrew, Alecha, this is like, where are you?
Okay.
But if you're asking kind of what is the meaning, I don't even think that is necessarily the meaning. It's not why are you where you are. I believe that God is going, where are you? In the sense that he is saying, I know where you are, but I'm giving you a chance to come clean here, to show yourself. And Stephen, you kind of addressed it like a parent, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, like asking a question we always ask questions for many reasons, but a parent is often asking a question they already know the answer of to a child. You watch the whole thing where you punched your brother in the face. You watched it all happen, and you turn the kid and go, what did you do? Yeah. And they go, okay, I want to give you an opportunity, confess, to give me your perspective, to let you speak into your own actions. If I just jump in there and say, I saw what you did, bam, now you have the right to do that as a parent, and most times you are doing that because of the age of the child. But when someone isn't walked through why they do something, oftentimes it is not a healthy practice psychologically for a child. Making a kid answer his own behavior is better sometimes than jumping in quite a bit and just fixing the behavioral problem. And I think God is portraying this. He's like, okay, I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak on your actions. And so I'm going to ask it in a form of a question without making a demand.
It's not a question out of ignorance.
So it's a declarative question that you know the answer to.
So in that way, yes, Debbie, it would be like, why are you where you are? In that sense of what we're saying. So I'll just read you from the notes in the net, the syntactic notes in the Net Bible. It says, where are you? The question is probably rhetorical, a figure of speech called erotesis. I love their weird words. That's grammatical
Why
stuff.
don't people use real words?
I don't know. Rather than literal. So it's rhetorical rather than literal because it was spoken to the man who answers it with an explanation of why he was hiding rather than location. The question has more of the force of, why are you hiding? So
you'd say that with the literal interpretation. If I asked you, where are you? I'm not asking physical location. I'm like, well, right now I'm not in a good place, right? People do this all the time.
Right.
And so I think that's what it's saying. It's like the question is deeper than it even sounds on the surface. Is God saying, where are you right now? And I find that to be like, what are you doing? And so it works the same way.
I mean, look, it's the same thing could be said. So he says, where are you? And we shouldn't imply that God doesn't know.
I'm hiding from my sin.
And then he goes, who told you were naked? God doesn't know. Who told them? Did you eat from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? God already knows that too.
Yeah.
And the man said, the woman who gave it. So the Lord turned to the woman. What is this that you've done? Again, the Lord is not acting ignorant. He is eliciting the opportunity for them to confess so that they can repair the relationship. The horror of the text is they never confess.
Makes you wonder what
they
would
say
happen.
what they
Blamed.
did, but they blame.
Man.
They don't take responsibility.
And we see this again in the New Testament when Peter denied Christ 3 times. And then Christ said, do you love me? 3 times. Do you love me?
And you see this in Greg's testament at his house when I talk to my children.
Yes. Well, or at my house when my wife's going, are you listening to me? Are you listening to me?
You know the answer to that.
Yes.
But if you answered, then you were listening.
Hey,
Anyway.
Hey, listening to me.
We're glad that you guys joined with us. We hope, Debbie, you appreciated those answers. We'll be tackling your questions and everybody else's. And so, again, if you do have questions, send them our way at rabbittrail@obcc.church. We have that email, rabbittrail@obcc.church. You can post them on our YouTube site, however you want to get them to us. Write them down and drop them on Brent's desk. Any of those ways are great. We're just glad that you've joined with us. We pray that God will bless you as you continue on your exploration of the truth. May the Lord bless you and lead you down those rabbit trails.
Boom, chakalaka.
Bye.